Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to everyone listening online at HughHewitt.com and our 200 affiliates across the United States of America. Great to have you on the program this morning. We begin this hour with the Deputy Secretary of Energy, Dan Brouillette. He has been there since 2017. He's the number 2 in the department behind Governor Rick Perry, a friend of the program, and he's a friend of ours. Even though he's from San Antonio, doesn't know much about basketball, we are glad to have him here. Deputy Secretary Brouillette, welcome.
Thank you, Hugh. I don't know much about basketball. You're absolutely right.
Well, the Spurs have never impressed. K-Loop is my affiliate down in San Antonio, and the Spurs fans are always calling up and harassing me about the Cavaliers. Deputy Secretary Brouillette, let's start with the obvious. A fusillade of 20 missiles and drones hit Saudi Arabia production. Oil prices spiked 10% this morning. Light crude's down to $61.65 a barrel, so it's beginning to shake off the impact. What is the impact on global energy supplies of what is believed to be the Iranian attack on Saudi Arabia?
Hugh, as you just pointed out, this is a very sophisticated, it's a brazen attack on one of the world's largest and frankly most important parts of the energy infrastructure. The Abqaiq facility is the world's largest processing facility. It processes somewhere on the neighborhood of 6.5, perhaps 7 million barrels of oil per day. So very important part of what we do. Surprisingly, though, in some respects, the world's oil market is sort of not written off, but has sort of shrugged off this important attack, and that's a sea change in where we were just 10 years ago, perhaps even just 5 years ago. You know, had this happened back in the 70s, we'd be looking at $100 to $150 a barrel per oil. The fact that we're not, I think, shows one, the oil markets are fundamentally different than they were back then. And two, America is in a fundamentally different place than it was back then. Our production is up. We're going to produce somewhere near 13 million barrels per day in 2019. That's probably going to jump to about 13.5 million barrels per day. And because of that, we are able to withstand any of these types of activities around the world.
Now, the president responded by saying we're going to accelerate pipeline construction. We're going to accelerate production of oil wherever we can. What role does the Department of Energy actually have in any of those decisions? It seems to me pipeline decisions are primarily state functions because they control the land use issues.
Well, intrastate, you're absolutely right. But interstate, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, has a role to play, as does the U.S. Department of Transportation. So the president's directed all of the agencies that have a part of this, a piece of this puzzle, if you will, to move expeditiously to move some of these permits through the process. The U.S. Department of Energy does approve and does permit certain things. So like the export facilities for LNG, for instance, falls as part to the United States Department of Energy. What we've done at Secretary Perry's direction and the president's direction is what we feel are very common sense things. And I'll just give you one quick example. For instance, in the past administration, if you wanted to build a LNG export facility, you had to first come to DOE and get what was called a public interest authorization. That allowed you to go to FERC and actually get the permit that you needed to begin the work or make your investment. We looked at that and said, oh, wait a minute. We got some pretty smart people here at the Department of Energy, but we're not economists. And certainly, if someone wants to risk their money on an export facility, who are we to tell them it's not in the public interest? So we just took away that requirement and said, put your money on the table, go to FERC, get your permit, and build your business. We think that's a common sense approach. And the president has directed us, other agencies as well, to do the same thing.
Well, energy is freedom. It's freedom for everyone, so I'm all for the production of it. Let me raise a second-order impact of the Iranian brazenness. If they can mount that sophisticated level of an attack against the Saudi facility, they can also launch drones and cruise missiles against the United Arab Emirates nuclear plants. I don't know if anyone has talked about this yet, but are we looking at the defense of, it's the gold standard. What they have constructed there is the safest nuclear power in the world. But if the Iranians are so reckless as to attack the world energy supply, imagine what they'll do to little Sparta if they can. Have we looked at defending that cluster of plants?
Absolutely. We've had several conversations. The National Security Council met yesterday, as a matter of fact. We discussed a number of issues. Security in the region is paramount. It is important that we make sure that the region remains stable. Iran is a malign actor. They will do anything at any time, so we need to be prepared for that. What the president has asked and what he has directed, however, is for Saudi Arabia to step up to the plate. We want a signal from Saudi Arabia that they are going to provide for their own defense as well. And once they are willing to do that, then we feel that security in the region will be secure. So we're looking at all of these various options.
What does that mean for Saudi Arabia to step up? What are you looking for, Deputy Secretary Brouillette?
Well, security in the region, stability in the region starts locally. And, the Saudis have been great allies in the region. They've purchased a number of weapon systems from the United States. Those are on the ground. We want them to do their own intelligence so that they can figure out where the attack came from and make their own determination about how they want to respond. The president doesn't want to get ahead of the kingdom in a response to Iran. He said very clearly yesterday, the attack is on Saudi Arabia. It is their facility. Now, it is also an attack on the world economy because we all know how Saudi Arabia fits into that puzzle. But nonetheless, this is first and foremost a local attack on Saudi Arabia. So we need to understand how they want to respond first, and then we'll work closely with them to do exactly that.
Now, let me ask you about a column I wrote for the Washington Post on September 2nd. Earlier this month, I called attention to the president's July 12 memo saying he wanted a complete review of the uranium cycle, mining of uranium, milling of uranium, conversion into gas, and enrichment of uranium. How goes that effort? Is it going to make the 90-day deadline that he put forward, especially with the changeover at the National Security Council with John Bolton leaving?
Yeah, no, we are. We're very much on track. I got a briefing on this yesterday, as a matter of fact. I think we have reached agreement on the interagency process on the front end of the fuel cycle. We have addressed many of the issues that the industry has raised that, we candidly weren't fully apprised of, it didn't fully appreciate. They've brought those to the table. We work closely with them. We're closing out some of our conversations on the back end of the fuel cycle, but we're going to meet this 90-day deadline, and I think fair to say within the next week or two, we're going to present a draft to the White House. We hope to have it all the way through the process sometime in the first or perhaps second week of October.
Now, the president has an opportunity to make a huge impact on a much neglected part of our economy. And for those who worry about global climate change, whether or not we buy into the extent of the threat, they've got to admit that nuclear is part of it. And our enrichment, if we don't get back in that business, our ships are going to come up dry or dependent on foreign sources in 40 years. That's not responsible. So do you expect the president to make the kind of investment and commitment to nuclear from the beginning, from mining, all the way through the end enrichment that the country needs?
I do indeed. He is very much focused on it. There's been a number of ideas presented to him. He wants a thorough review, though, of the entire process. As you might recall, a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, a few folks had some ideas about, perhaps you put a tariff on imported uranium, perhaps you do this, or perhaps you do that. The president said, stop, give me a complete review. I want to know top to bottom what's going on here. So that's the purpose of this working group, and that's what we're about to present to him. He has been very keen on this, and he's approaching it, from the very same, angle that you are, Hugh, to be honest. We get some pressure every now and then from the Europeans and others who, criticize the president for backing out the Paris Accords. The bottom line is that none of those countries are going to meet those environmental targets that they have set for themselves without nuclear power. And that's a very, very important point that is not lost on the president.
Yeah, the president said last night or yesterday in the Oval that the Dems believe in wind, solar, and make-believe. And that is not reliable. Energy is freedom, and we need to up production of everything. So let me go to natural gas to close this out. We need to export that to Europe to make sure that they do not become dependent on Russian natural gas supplies to Germany. How goes that effort, Deputy Secretary Brouillette?
Goes very well. We had a series of meetings earlier this year and late last year with the Germans in particular about what we feel is overdependence on Gazprom and the Russians. They have agreed, the Angela Merkel government has agreed to invest $500 million in two facilities in Germany. There's two LNG import facilities that the government is helping fund. We think that's an important step for Germany to take. We also think it's an important step for Europe to take. And in conjunction with that, the Secretary has led an effort in the southern part of Europe, what we refer to as the 3 Cs initiative, and that is to bring U.S. gas, or frankly any gas, into the southern part of Europe through the development of import facilities there, LNG import facilities. all of that is designed to reduce their dependence on one source or one supplier of gas. The president's approach from day one, I mean literally from day one, has been develop all forms of energy, make yourself or make your energy supplies very diverse. That will give you security, reduce your risk.
That is so great to hear. Energy is freedom, and oil markets are stable. And Deputy Secretary Brouillette, come back anytime. Say hello to Rick Perry for me. Always a great and welcome guest here on the Hugh Hewitt Show as well. Stay tuned, America. I'll be right back.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.